join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the Republic. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting of the East Troy School District Board of Education and all other meetings of the board are open to the public in compliance with state statute. Notice of the meeting has been sent to the media and/or has been publicly posted in an attempt to make the citizens of the district aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting.
I will make a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
I will second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor of the agenda, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
I'd also like to make a motion to approve the minutes from the October 21st, 2019 regular board meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion or comments on the meeting minutes? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Public participation is not happening. So we'll move on to financial report.
At this time, I move the approval of the October 2019 payments in the amount of $1,679,178.51 and receipts in the amount of $181,959.76 as reflected on the financial statements.
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion, questions? Anything, Kathy, you want to cover?
Just this is one of those months where you see the cash flow discrepancy
Mhm.
again, with how much you have in expenses going out, very little revenues, typically in. And it starts the time when we need our short-term borrowing, from October till about January 20th, when our taxes come in. I can't remember if it's the 20th or the 15th. I want to say January 15th, February 20th. Then once we get those winter taxes, we're good again until about June.
Cap, the phone savings, that's
Yes.
a lot.
That is a
How did
lot.
that come about?
So I'm putting him on the spot, but I had a little blurb in here about your analysis of the phone savings, and I know this gets into some technical language that I can explain, like a PRI line, he changed from 24 ports when he was analyzing what was actually used, blah, 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 so I'll
Sure.
let him take over.
Yeah, we worked with a company called Telecom Fitness, and what they do is they work with school districts and they analyze your phone bills, they look at what you have, what kind of capacity you need. So they ran a short phone study on our PRI, which is our phone lines that come in and out of the district. We had 24, and over the couple months that they did the study, we peaked at like 8. So they said, well, you could get away with a package of 12 lines instead of 24, which saves us a ton of money. Plus, we switched from CenturyLink to Time Warner Spectrum, which brought the bill down even more. We haven't had any issues with the 12 lines. We haven't maxed out or anything like that. So that's the bulk of the savings. We did a few other things like switch the plain old telephone lines to Cetrix lines. It's maybe $4 or $5 a line per month, but it's money. So that helped with the savings as well.
Is the Spectrum an internet-based phone service then, as opposed to CenturyLink that's hardwired?
No, they both use the same technology. So it's the PRI line that goes through our phone system. It does end up going out just phone lines though, once it goes through the phone system.
So no risk of the internet being down and us losing phones?
Correct, no risk.
If we find that we need to bump capacity up again, I'm assuming it's not putting us in a position where we're going to move backwards on the savings.
It would cost more to add lines.
Mhm. But still less than we were at.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. It was my understanding was the Spectrum was cheaper overall than CenturyLink.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions on the financial report? Okay, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to the discussion action items. First one is referendum planning towards development of possible referendum question.
Yeah, so if you, on page 4 of the minutes, we'll review that first, which kind of brings us to that topic, right? So at the last board meeting, which has been referenced in our minutes, for anybody that would want to view it online, The board asked for a few questions to be drafted, roughly between the $98 and $126 maybe tax impacts. Where did those numbers come from? Was from the survey itself that we had gotten feedback on. And then you guys had asked for us as the administration team to begin outlining what that would look like if we were to have a tax impact of a referendum question, and whether it be at a 1.4 to 1.5 to 1.6, via the different tax impacts, what would get addressed. So if we were to address Bob's list of priorities and maintenance needs over the next 5 years, to how are we going to handle the structural deficits via the Baird model, what would that look like? So as a district, even though that wouldn't be the exact resolution, right, we could start having a map, and in our discussions too with everybody as we explain the resolution, we could at least be able to begin to discuss with them how the funds would be utilized. And to be frank, what would still not possibly get addressed with the resolution, and that we would be obviously prioritizing those areas. So with that being said, the administration team did meet, and we came up with, and that is on page 70, if you go to page 70, we came up with various scenarios, and so Kathy's going to bring it up, I think, up here. If I can point out on the sheet while Kath is bringing that up, so a couple of things is, on the bottom, towards the bottom left side, you'll see that we've gone over again. Everybody here has seen this, but I just want to bring it up again. So the projected deficits, if nothing were to happen, those are based off the Baird model forecast with our assumptions that we do each year with enrollments, the assumptions of insurance increase and salary increases. And so, as you can see, we did a year through 5 projections. We don't go out past 5 years. And obviously, with the structural deficit that our district would be experiencing each and every year. Within that, then going across the top, you'll see that we looked at it from a standpoint of a $1.4 million referendum question up into 1.6 to 1.8 to $2 million, and then what the tax impact would be for those. And then obviously we put in there from this original survey, if we recall, and it's not to sway it all, but just stating that the highest amount of support at that point in time was for 1.5 or lower, but primarily it wasn't due to the total amount, it was about 98 cents per thousand or less of an impact. That's really the key component of that highest support. So obviously numbers can fluctuate, and Kathy will talk about that, why certain numbers have fluctuated a little since then. But the one thing on this survey that hasn't fluctuated, right, is the 98 cents, not necessarily equivalent to 1.4, 1.5, because A can alter that. And so that is the rationale then. And then what we did on the bottom, we'll go through that, was on the priorities, we tried to show, based on the survey, people responded back, right, maintenance, safety and security, classroom science labs if doable and possible, and then obviously our structural deficit we know on that Baird model that we need to address. The balancing act on that Baird model in addressing the structural deficit that I know everybody here, we talked about it, but I want to explain again, right, is obviously any referenda dollars that are used each and every year to help offset that structural deficit, it becomes compounding every year thereafter. So, you know, for example, I know everyone gets it, I'm more speaking to the camera right now, but of the $464,635 in year one structural deficit, which would be for next year, the projection of structural deficit for next year, right? So if we were, roughly speaking, let's say we were able to take 300,000 and apply that to that structural deficit for next year, all right, just hypothetically, some of our referendum dollars would be used towards that. If 300,000, right, so that would mean as a district, we still would be looking at obviously around that $164,000, $165,000 mark that we would be making the reductions on still. But that 300,000 of the referendum dollars that we used, right, obviously that 300,000 is going to get carried over into the next year of the structural deficit too. So that $500,000 projected deficit in year 2 is really $800,000 because we're carrying over because we only cut $164,000 to balance it, if that's making sense. So there's no doubt when we talk about an operational, right, an operational referendum, we are very forthright when we tell people that when they say, well, if you're not making reductions to balance the budget using all the dollars of the referendum, that there will be a larger compound deficit 5 years out or whenever that ends. And the reality is yes. That is true, unless enrollment changes drastically, unless state funding changes, the aid changes, right? There are a lot of variables that could alter that by all means, but there is no doubt about that, that it is about, we're saying, maintaining, right? We're trying to maintain programming, class sizes, maintaining, being an attractive district from a standpoint of attracting quality employees and retaining quality employees from a standpoint of insurance and salaries. So we're looking at it from that whole aspect. That's a reality, and there's no doubt about that. So I'm gonna have Kathy go through it, but on that bottom, I think we did what you asked, and I'm pretty proud of it, and that is the fact that we showed, like, if you were to do 1.4, you could do a 1.4 million. We showed the impact, but we tried to show you like how that could be arranged, right? I mean, the resolution question could be the same for all three of the 1.4s, meaning 1.4. The resolution question would be the same, but how we address it could be drastically different. You could do all maintenance, or you could do partial maintenance and do some of the structural deficit, right? And that doesn't necessarily have to be put into the resolution itself, but I think it's going to be really important if we go forward to be able to explain that to the community, what the idea of behind the 1.4 would be, you know, roughly used for. Obviously, there needs to be an understanding, there has to be flexibility within that too, due to the fact that something happens drastically on one end of the spectrum or other that reduces the structural deficit or increases it. I think that you would probably be wanting us to come back with a budget that might have more put towards the structural deficit and less towards maintenance if needed. So I'm going to have Kathy go through all those options.
So I think this is the bulk of the meeting tonight. So, you know, feel free to jump in, ask questions. I think this is gonna take some time to digest. Certainly when we were laying it out, we got ourselves confused about 3 times and then had another meeting and then went back to it. So I'm trying to say I feel a little bad that you're trying to digest this here in one meeting night. But we'll try to go through it, and again, please jump in if you have any questions or, you know, want to make some comment, and then I can clarify as needed. So in the upper left-hand corner, we felt that we were charged for this November meeting with a couple of different scenarios coming forth with that. The amount was really what was in question in our heads. That's why we have amount question mark. We're looking for you guys to decide tonight, are we going for that 1.4 million, 1.6 million, 1.8 million, 2 million, you know, what are we gonna draft with the attorney come the next board meeting? You will have a legal language then in front of you, and if you're going to referendum, you would make the approval by December, so that is our 2019 approval for referendum. And then you again have the possibility that should it fail in April, you can go back for a November referendum, because legally you can make one motion to go to referendum per year. So this would count as a 2019, next year would count as 2020. So in the upper left-hand corner, again, we're here to figure out the amount. Verbiage would say something about maintenance, safety and security, maintain operations. I think we were, again, headed all down that track pretty well. I'm going to take you all the way to the right now, upper right. As I told you, we have 3 meetings on just this sheet. There were a couple of key phrases that kept coming to light, and so we just wrote them up there to have as like referring back to them. We kept coming to that, is this question, are we going to ask for closer to what we need dollar-wise in the question, or are we going to ask what may pass? And that was something that came up in the ad hoc committee also, like a common theme. And rephrasing it again, just underneath it. Is it about what we need versus what people will spend? That's another way to look at it. And then the third question, though, can we afford to not have an April referendum pass? So, you know, sometimes the comment was made, well, let's go a little higher first time, and then if it doesn't pass. But we really started to think it would be nice if this passed in April, because then you could go into next year's budget with these figures, not be hoping that a November one will pass, which that gets kind of complicated because you can actually set 2 levies how those dates align in November, you may have already set your levy before the vote happens. So that's what I'm saying, you can set 2 levies, but it's a game a little bit again of where those dates fall, whether you will be able to apply the monies to 2021 at all, or if you're gonna go 21, 22, if we go on November referendum, okay? Then in blue or in gray on your sheet, because I don't think it printed in color, that first column, we were just trying to put some key statistics from the survey. We looked back at the chart, and one of the things we had tested, the lowest tax impact dollar was 98 cents, and it had 47% support. That was always the one we were saying it didn't even have 50% support, the lowest dollar amount. So we were saying we gotta go less than the 98 cents if we wanted to get 50%, and if we believed that the survey was representative of the population of our community. Another thing, in that survey, we were testing a 3-year operational. Now we're talking about a 5-year, and we were doing some of those maintenance projects as bonds spread over 20 years. So if you go back to the survey, I just want to point out again that if you're trying to compare like some of those maintenance costs, it's a little different structure now. It's not in a 20-year bond, so the costs again are a little bit different. What else did we have? I knew I should have brought my glasses. Oh, the purpose. So down below, as we were completing this chart, we were trying to say, okay, what's the purpose going to be in each of these different options? Thank you. And obviously, we were surveying at that time, so we had multiple purposes that were on the table. And then, as Dr. Hibner went into, the part that is in this border on this sheet is the same amount of money, just 3 different ways. Okay? So you could do a $1.4 million referendum, and you could put it all towards maintenance. And then, Bob, you had handed out a sheet of paper.
Yes.
And it's folded there, they're big. One of them is what 1.4 would look like.
One of them is 1.4, and in the margins on the side, it should say totality would be a proposed Fund 46 maintenance plan. So that one's going to actually have more pages to it, and that's one what Kathy and I were talking about, a Fund 46, or what would we do if we had a 5-year plan at 1.4 per year. We actually ran it twice, so in the totality of that, there's 2 different sections. It actually equals 10 years, and at the end of that 10-year plan, we would have hit every roof, every boiler, every parking lot would have been taken care of, LED lighting throughout the district, LED lighting outside, and there would be other security enhancements, upgrades, and some other things that happen. So that's a fairly complete 10-year potential plan. The other one is the 5-year, and that's on that crescendoing amount of dollars. And each one at the top will tell you that one should start. It would have nothing in the gray margins on the side. It's only 3 pages, excuse me. And then it would show you, what would we do with 1.2? What would we do with 1 million? What would we do with 800,000?
And that's 1A on your sheet.
Okay. And I'm sorry, the multiple sheets for which one again? This is
That would actually show what the potential could look like for a Fund 46 plan. Because in my understanding of it, as Kathy and I talked about it, in order to have you approve a Fund 46 plan, we have to show you a 10-year plan. So that 10-year plan is also broken up into 2 5-year kind of referendum plans at 1.4 million. I hope that
yes.
clears it up a little bit.
In the whole Fund 46, there's also a Fund 41. We may or may not go there, depending upon, again, how this progresses. Bob and I were trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So we were saying, let's prep these dollar amounts for the referendum, but also, again, he's mentioning a Fund 46 requires a 10-year plan, so boom, it's all connected. Okay.
How do we feel if we get 5 years into the Fund 46 plan, we go for a second referendum,
Yeah.
and it's defeated?
I still feel a lot better than I did today.
Okay.
We're still going to address a lot of things, and we're going to put the district in a better position, because hopefully we're going to have addressed a lot of utility improvements that can also give you future flexibility and some cost savings and cost avoidance. So either way, Mr. Diggle, we're going to feel a lot better than we do today.
Okay.
Now, if we went with the other plan,
The 1A.
the 1A,
Yes.
what would your total time frame be to get to that point where everything is taken care of?
At 1A, it's gonna take me a little bit longer time. I'm probably closer to 10 to 15 years, obviously because dollar figures come back. But the thing we do in 1A that's a little bit different, Mr. Zess, is we run forward a lot more of the utility savings plans. Because we're trying to, again, ramp up or just speed up the ability to hit those cost avoidance numbers.
Sure.
In the other plan a little bit, we were trying to match things along with the design of the plan to do safety, security, and maintenance, and kind of start hitting all of those in every year, so.
In 1A though, we still hit the security immediately.
Security gets
At
hit the
middle
first year,
school,
correct.
Then we go with some of the other
Upgrades of utilities,
utilities
boilers and stuff
for
like that are
cost
high
savings.
priority in
Maybe
those
help
first
with
2 years.
structural deficit a little.
Right.
It's good.
But you don't have the middle school science labs or that in there.
No.
Then I would need my glasses back.
We have that in the full 1.4, and then we have it again later in the $2 million plan.
Sure. Okay.
But it's not in the 1A.
It's not in the
No.
1A.
Sorry, we couldn't do that.
With one asterisk, we talked about, and Bob's very smart here, to put the energy efficiency projects first if he has less money. That was the thinking. I think it was 2 weekends ago, I read something from the state bill that they're considering bringing back the energy efficiency exemption. So that's also noted way down on the bottom of your paper. It could complicate things further, but look at it like an option. Look at it like, well, then if that does come back, maybe then we don't do the energy efficiency projects first, and maybe we push that to a separate level. So if I can recap what that is for a second, maybe 10 years ago it started, and it allows you to do some energy efficiency projects without a referendum, okay? They're above and beyond the tax levy. At the time when it was out there as an option, we were also going to referendum for the series of referendums that were unfortunately failing in Little Prairie. And I did have one contractor that kept calling me, you know, you can use the energy efficiency exemption. And I would say, number one, we briefly talked about it at the board, we would like voter approval. The energy efficiency, you don't need voter approval. Some people think it looks like a little hidden way to go around the tax levy, okay? Number two, I always felt that our projects were more than energy efficiency. And this contractor would tell me, oh, no, you can really stretch this energy efficiency. You can make it about everything you want. And I'm going, parking lots? You really gonna put in parking lots and call it energy efficiency? It didn't like it, didn't feel comfortable with it. And then the third reason is that there's a performance contracting with it, which tends to, I've been told, mark up the prices of the projects so that the people doing the contracting can get a cut. So there's a, again, percentage that would not be paid, or that the cost would not be there if you weren't running it through this whole energy efficiency process. So there are a couple of things that I didn't like in all of that. But again, sometimes you have to use the tools that you are given to make things work in today's funding. So if we had, again, some specific like LED lighting projects, enough to make it worth it, because again, it is a hassle, you have to go through a lot of hoops, but we could pull that out, go back to the highest needs maintenance list, and then use the energy efficiency exemption. If, again, our aid was looking okay, if our levy was looking okay, if we felt that need a couple years down the line, and if it was back, if it was available again.
When will you know when that may be available?
I don't know. It was just a news article that a couple legislators are pushing for it to be back,
Okay,
but I don't know if and when.
okay.
Yeah.
Twice we tried to use them, and twice the price, we could beat their price internally. so they didn't even want to do it for us.
Yeah, and it just makes more sense. It doesn't make sense for us to spend more money just to get a grant. I mean, it's not fiscally responsible for us to do that.
Okay, so let's see here. So option one, again, is kind of the less complicated option in the sense that we're only spending on maintenance. Okay, there's a lot of maintenance, but it's clear, the message is simple, that's where we go. I admit, I started to waver and even said it at the last board meeting, I would hate for you guys to put yourself in a hole such that, oh, we say we're only gonna use it on maintenance, and then we have $600,000 deficits in year 2 or year 3. And I've been around too many other business managers whose boards have went to referendum for X, and then 2 or 3 years down the line, we're sitting in a meeting and they go, oh, my board now wants to use it for teacher salaries, or they now want to use it for something else. What do I do? Okay, so we want to be very transparent, very like upfront, and have you choose now. You know, is it really again maintenance only? Is it that we're going to apply some when we don't have enough revenue coming from the state? And when we have 8% insurance increases, we have, you know, whatever the case may be, utilities increasing again, and we're getting 0% from the state or 1% from the state. And the reality is we will all be wanting to use some of this money for offsetting that deficit if we're in that hole. So that's where we have option 1A, we called it, where a portion less is going to maintenance, more is going towards a deficit, but as Chris explained very well, you know, that deficit compounds, because you have to think of it as, if this first year we have a $400,000 deficit, and we make cuts, we make insurance changes, we do whatever to rectify 200,000 of that deficit, we still then use this money for 200,000. The next year, well, we have to use that same 200,000 again, plus if you want to apply some money now to the new year's deficit. So this is kind of outlining year 1, year 2, year 3, where it might look. I forgot this little section down on the bottom. Chris said we ran new Baird numbers, and we'll get to that a little later in the meeting. We use that activity that you guys picked, your how conservative were you theory, and this was really fun for me. But we'll talk about that under the proper agenda item. But these were the deficits that came out when we were using some of those assumptions.
You see on 1A, so then, right, the difference between the 1.4 option 1, if we just did a 1.4 all maintenance, then 1A, right, is self-explanatory. What we did was, we said, okay, it's still 1.4, still the same tax impact, but do we want to open up the resolution larger, right, than just maintenance? That would be operations too, right, besides maintenance and maybe safety security. Do we open it up to operations, which then what we elected to do was, okay, so that would allow us to address some of the structural deficit. You know, don't hold us to the exact amounts of how much we would put toward each structural deficit, because we'd want to see that, but an example would be, okay, in the first year we addressed, instead of 1.4 maintenance, as we put there, it'd be like 1.2 maintenance, 200,000 would go towards the 400,000 structural deficit. Second year, right, we reduced it down to 1 million of maintenance, no longer 1.2, now it goes down to 1 million, and the other 400,000 that year would go towards the structural deficit, because the structural deficit's growing. So it would be the structural deficit, right? And we still would, just so you know, right, I mean, with that compounding, even off of like those numbers, if you think of it this way, we still would be looking at like $160,000 cuts in year 1, or reduction somewhere, and we'd be looking at 300,000 in year 2 already in reductions. I mean, those referendum dollars of just restructuring the dollars help to reduce the structural deficit. But as a district, we recognize we still would need to do certain reductions to balance, because it's not covering the whole deficit. Still, and in a way, that could be a good thing, due to the fact, as we explained, right after 5 years, your compound is not as significant, because we have been making some reductions each and every year with those two. If you were to ask me the next question, I won't answer, but I'll say it because I think it's a valid question. And that would be, so what type of reductions would you be thinking about within those components? That's, honestly, that's a great question. It's too early to answer, right? I would not want to hold any of the administration or anybody else in committee work to that yet to know, because so many things are unknown, right? The insurance and all those other variables, enrollments, because that number could alter and change for the positive, maybe, we hope, but maybe not, right? I mean, we had 16% increase last year on insurance, so if it were to go the opposite direction, so as we said, right, everything would have to be looked at and on the table again. But I think it's really important that people understand, even under that option, right? As maintenance begins to get reduced every bit, a little year of that 1.4, and it goes more, and it starts to shift towards structural deficit every year because it's getting larger, we still are having to make cuts, and it will get more and more significant each year too. But it's what we're trying to show you is that's an option to balance the two.
The third option, 1B, is that you're not spending anything on maintenance, and you spend it all on the deficit. By the end of year 5, I just wanted to peek at the Baird model, you have a $2.3 million cliff on that. So again, you pretty much have to go back to referendum in this scenario, because otherwise in year 6, you're going to be reducing 2.8. This is going to be 2.3 plus another $500,000 from that year's deficit if you're trying to balance the budget. This is where districts get into it's always a recurring, even though it's a non-recurring, we have to go back, otherwise we're laying off 45 teachers kind of thing, okay? No projects, and I think our number here at 1.4 million when we ran it didn't even fully cover all of the years. There was still even a little bit of a shortfall, even with applying everything to the deficit and nothing towards maintenance. So that was interesting to compute.
Now for the 1.4 Kath too, so why don't we just stick with that, and then we'll move over to the 1.6 and 1.8.
Sure.
So for the 1.4, due to the fact we showed each one of those three is 1.4, it's just how we're using the funds.
Yes.
But could you go through with the board, and that is then the impact, because it's the same impact for each, but
Sure.
because it's 1.4 in general, but just can we go through that, what we did on that calculation?
Sure, and you know, we picked like a maintenance only, a no maintenance, and then a middle of the road. Like you could have some variations, obviously, between those 3 plans also. But yeah, so Chris is saying, what are the numbers? We tested in the survey, 98 cents was, I believe, 1.5 million for those 3 years. I just got our new Baird model again, rolled forward. Remember at last meeting, I don't know if you remember, I barely remember, but we had better aid than projected. Our equalization aid came in much higher. I was predicting it to go down, didn't happen. So we ended up with much more favorable tax impact figures for now, again, and I have to say, these are projections. As soon as you change, again, assumptions in the Baird model, I don't care what assumption it is, if your aid comes in better or worse, your numbers are going to change. But it's as good, again, using your line, Bob, that you say now, it's as good, again, as the numbers that we have at this time. And then when I got into the real detail, I started computing it 2 different ways. And this was, again, one of the meetings we had, and I said, which way should we put it? And then we just decided to be extremely transparent and to put it both ways, and to frankly let you decide. So this top way is if we say, what's the pure cost of adding this 1.4 million? Okay? What's that pure cost? This bottom way is, well, again, depending upon what assumptions you put in the Baird model, the assumptions we put in, the tax levy grew by 2 to 3% a year annually anyway, without any referendum. So these bottom numbers are the average of 5 years of this cost plus a 2 to 3% levy increase annually anyway. Meaning our mill rate now, I thought I put it on there, is $9.18. Our mill rate now is $9.18. If we go up, what, again, the model, the projection is telling us we would naturally go up 2 to 3%, and add a referendum, we would be at 10.12. So this 10.12 is 9.18 plus 94 cents. Okay? And again, we started to really battle this one because we went back in the survey and it really felt like in the survey we were saying, what would you support as an additional cost of a referendum? And it was 98 cents, okay? So we're like, all right, so we're going with this line, right here. And then we would talk about, yeah, but somebody's gonna open up their tax bill the next year, and they're gonna say, your mill rate's now 10.12. It was 9.18. You didn't go up 83 cents, you went up 94 cents. So, again, we just decided to show you both, lay it out here, and try to figure out which one we're most comfortable with. Are we most comfortable with saying, here's the extra cost of the referendum itself alone, or are we saying, you know what, we factored in a 2 to 3% natural increase of the mill rate, whichever, you know, if it happens or doesn't happen. Some years we've been, I think 2 of the last 5 years we've been flat. I think 1 of the last 5 years we've decreased.
One of the things that we really talked a lot about, and we did debate this back and forth, like trying to talk about, like, I mean, we're trying to be transparent, forthright, right? I mean, we're not trying to hide anything. But I think one of the big things is when we did this survey and we were asking people about a referendum and what would be supported on the referendum. We didn't ask the referendum with your annual 2 to 3% additional tax impact, right? That's separate, and that's usually always discussed, right? That's our annual meeting in our annual impact, right? Our tax levy. But what we're trying to be is transparent in the end. We're like, okay, let's share. I mean, right now off our projections, that 1.4 would equate to 83 cents per thousand. 83 cents, so $83 per $100,000 home. And we said, let's just put it on here. Let's not debate this anymore. We'll put it on here and state with the estimated 2 to 3% increase too. Okay, that'll bring it up to 94 cents per thousand. So $94 per $100,000 home. So then an individual who says, what's the referendum with my, you're not discussing the referendum with my taxes. Yeah, we are. We're showing you both. But we also don't want somebody to say, well, it's 94 cents per thousand for that 1.4. No, off our projections, it's 83 cents. That's what the other one. So we're being forthright with both so they can see the whole impact, referendum, and what it would be with your additional 2 to 3% estimated tax impact levy increase, which both are below the 98 cents, even with that way.
Yes, good point. So yeah, whichever way they want to think about it, a 1.4 hits that. It's below the 98 cents. Not the entire tax bill, but the East Troy School District line. Again, depending upon, these are averages. We always talk about depends on what your individual municipality does, depends on what your individual property value does within your municipality. But again, an average tax levy increase with, again, including the 2 to 3% natural, if it happens, increase, would be a 10% increase with that referendum. Okay.
So those are the 1.4, 3 different ways in which it could be utilized. Obviously, tax impact same for all 3 of them, just how it could get represented. We wanted to share. So moving on, we'll take you over to number 2 then, and what number 2, 3, and 4 are, because we also said let's look at it because once we did this, we did recognize that we were below the 98 cents too on the survey, right? So we said, what does it look like? Because at the last board meeting, we talked about what 98 cents itself would be, and there was even some dialogue about what if we went over the 98 cents. Even though the survey didn't necessarily demonstrate full support, we said if we were to help people to understand why we did that, what it would look like. So we went beyond that too. So as you can see, the 1.6 we did, which is the 98 cents impact off our projections per thousand, which would equate to 1.6 million. And then we went above that with a 1.82 million to show you the impact and what that would do. So we'll take you through those things too and show you what the purpose of those 3 things will also do.
So you can see the numbers. Again, if you've got questions, what's this line again, what's that line again? Again, we had to think about it over and over and get it in our brains, but, and, you know, what's the purpose? We just put these down. You can alter them. You can say again, well, I want this amount, but I'd like 200,000 only, not 300,000. Let me just pick on this now, a 1.8 million. We said theoretically, you could put 300,000 the first year and then 200,000 each additional year. So your 1.8 would look like 1.5 million towards maintenance that year and address a $300,000 deficit. Well, then in the year 2, you have to address that same 300,000 that you did from year 1. It's still there. You're still spending on that. But you have a new deficit, and let's apply 200,000 new dollars to year 2. So, and then that continues to happen. You're always having to take care of what you didn't cut, what you didn't reduce from the previous years, and then add the new amount that you're trying to reduce the deficit by. Such that you get an average of 1.1 million per year on maintenance in that scenario. And again, mostly $200,000 of deficit reduction. 1 year was 300,000. So when you look across, you know, again, this first year you were giving Bob on that long plan 1.4 million a year. Here's an 800,000 maintenance a year. Here's 900,000 maintenance a year. Here's a 1.1 maintenance a year. Here's almost as good as the first one that was all maintenance. Still applying a little bit of the money to the ongoing deficit situation, but obviously it's one. So that's the, again, samples.
One of the things I'd like to bring up too, due to the fact that I realize that people who listen to us, right, they listen to us, but they don't have the necessary documents sometimes in front of them, right? So I'd just like to point out too, like on Bob's referendum projects, these have been discussed, right, for quite some time, and numerous board meetings ago, he gave us the prioritization, the list, 10-year plan out. And I think if people go back and look at our process, this was started 18 months ago, this dialogue, right? This dialogue tonight did not happen in the last board meeting. This dialogue tonight happened 18 months ago, and that's one of the things we're going to begin to share out, is the process. Like, we've been discussing it, but we want to share how we got into the ad hoc and the ad hoc recommendations and all that. And there's a process to tonight, right? But one of the things I just want to point out to the people watching at home, and Jody here sitting here, and that is, on his plan each year, right? If people say, well, what are these alleged needs, right? I just think that's important, because there is a difference between needs and wants. And I think off of here, again, when you're looking at these type of projects, I just want to point out whether or not whichever venue you go with, based upon Bob's projects of kind of going with the 1B, which is a 1.2 million to 1 million to 800, or having 1.4 every single year. But he has on replacing roof sections each and every year at the high school, the middle school, Prairie View, right? He has replacing a 1960 edition boiler. He has retrofitting a June air furnace from the 1950s. He's got the middle school security, obviously, on each and every one of these documents, if that's happening no matter what amount we were to go with. He has replacing of asphalt sections throughout, obviously, high school, middle school, over at the administration offices. He has replacing wood frame windows and retrofitting windows and all those things. And if we were to go with the utilities, he's got LED lighting replacement. Those are the type of things we're talking about. And I just think it's really important for people to understand what we're talking about, due to the fact I understand the wants and needs. But those are the needs that we're talking about that we cannot address under our current budget within our building and grounds budget. So when we're talking about what's Bob addressing within this 1.4, or if he gets 1.2 or 1 million, those are the type of things each and every year. They don't change. Those are common, consistent things each and every year that that is getting replaced. And as he addressed to your guys' question earlier, I mean, obviously, if he doesn't have the 1.4 million every year, then it'll just take that much longer to address those needs.
Well, I think,
I
sorry.
was gonna say, this is really laid out beautifully, honestly, to define what your projects are.
And I think a point that bears repeating, we've heard it the last 2 meetings at least, but I think it's important, when we talk about things like boilers, the cost of emergency work on a boiler is a heck of a lot more expensive if we get caught with our shorts down in February.
Correct.
And I mean, it's hard to build that into this. This assumes that we are able to be proactive, take care of it June 15th, when the kids go home for the summer, not today when,
Good point.
It's 12 degrees outside.
yeah,
That's great.
so.
What do you have in the budget now each year for maintenance? Approximately.
I can start you off.
But
It dwindles down. He has about a $1 million maintenance budget, but then half of it is utilities.
Right.
It's
Just,
just,
I mean, just
Right.
straight these types of things.
so that leaves us with 500,000. Then out of the 500,000, like the reports and blah, 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 I think you're down to like 100 to 200,000.
it's less than, yeah, it's not, it's similar to when I got here, Mr. Says, the problem is the buying power is just not there anymore.
Right.
That's the killer for us
For
right now.
sure.
We don't have the capability to buy what we used to.
Yep.
So, and some of these dollar figures have come up. And please understand that what you have in front of you is what we hope to be a conservative document, and we do hope to outperform it. So, please understand that we're gonna try to do as much with that money as we can.
Sure.
Bob, is it safe to say, when we talk about things like replacing asphalt,
Yes.
is it safe to say that if we can do 2 or 3 projects over a summer, that we're gonna see a modest savings just based on the scale of the project?
Yes.
Okay.
There's always an economy of scale that we can get, and clearly we can also move up a contractor's priority list by that economy of scale. And some of the advantages of knowing whether we can do it earlier, we can also get on their calendar a lot quicker and ensure that things are done, like we're hoping to inside our timelines.
Okay.
Also, I noticed there's sections from each school like laid out.
Correct.
You probably prioritize them like the worst shape. The ones worst shape are the first ones.
What we
that-
did, Mr. Bird, we kind of went by year. That's why on it, it always says on there will be core samples taken, and if we find a roof that's worse, that one will jump and move to the front of the list.
Is,
I always want to have that caveat.
is that how roofs are typically on these size of buildings done in sections? Or is there like a money savings to do like more on one building at a time?
You can get, again, a little bit of economy of scale by doing more. We're doing 2 things when we're starting to do this. Is A, we're going very, very hard at our insulation to get better insulation to get the R value. We're going to move away from ballasted roofs to fully adhered, because while there are some quality ballasted contractors out there, they're becoming harder to find. We want to make sure our pitches are right, because we're also noticing, like we talked about before, more of those heavy downpours. We want to make sure our drainage and our pitches are right to take those water loads. So there's a number of things that are going on there that we're talking with our consultants about.
Thank you.
This is excellent, Bob, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So really the dialogue tonight and kind of and if it be a motion second and any action were to be to give us direction on with legal counsel to get a resolution, this is not the resolution tonight, it'd be to get a resolution question designed based upon the information that's been presented tonight. So that what was put forth in front of you tonight was to help you guys have dialogue to determine what is that amount? Where do we want to put it toward? And again, like we said, right, the resolution question does not need to be designed that it states each and every year how much will go to structural deficit maintenance, right? It's about, are we going to form a resolution question? How much do you want it? What's the verbiage from a standpoint to maintenance, safety, security, and operations, or to maintain operations, that type of verbiage, and then to give really administration some direction based upon what you elect to do. If you do tonight on a dollar amount, it provides us direction on, okay, so you want some of the structural deficit to be offset, or you want all of it to always go to maintenance unless something drastic were to come up, which will help us to plan budgetary wise too, as we progress forward.
My initial thought process when we started these discussions was sort of in line with Kathy's. I was really in favor of having everything go to the hard tangible. I mean, we know what the tangible projects are that need to happen over the next 5 to 10 years. But I'm in the same boat that you were last time, and I guess knowing that funding mechanisms can change at the state level, knowing that there's a district we border that could bring a whole new set of variables and that we can't even fully begin to address yet. I think maintenance has to obviously stay the primary focus, but if there's a way that we can give ourselves some flexibility.
I would be inclined to agree with that. We need to be able to offset any of the operational costs, whether it's, you know, at the first year or the fourth year, whenever the need within that referendum, we need to be able to have the opportunity and the option to put the dollars where they need to go.
I would just hate to have something, I mean, let's just say hypothetically that there was an event that occurred as a result of the changes in the other school district, and all of a sudden we're put in a position where we have to talk about taking a grade level from one teacher for every 27 or 28 students to one to every 32 or 30. I mean, I can't even imagine being in that situation. I mean, I'd hate to come back and say, well, we can't address a roof issue that's also a priority, but at the end of the day.
Great buildings aren't good unless there's great things happening in them, so
Yeah.
I fully understand what you
Well
guys are
said.
talking
Wow, well said.
You're both leaning kind of towards the 1A aspect of keeping the operation, some operating money in there, and concentrating on maintenance for the most part, but keeping flexibility.
Yeah, and I don't even know that I want to specify, I mean.
Right. Just the question really wouldn't. It
Yeah.
just lays that it's possible to do maintenance
Right, I mean,
and operational
All encompassing.
and security.
right, I would be inclined to go for maybe like a 2 or a 3 with that option to, you know, address some of that operational business as well. That's kind of what I'm feeling.
I would agree. I know why the 98-cent number is important, but what I keep coming back to, and it circles back to the discussion we had last time, if that number's not enough to do what we really will need it to do, I don't know that we've necessarily, we bought ourselves some time, but I don't know that we've solved anything. And again, we're not going to solve everything with this.
Yeah, no matter what.
That's not going to happen. We're still
Right.
going to have tough choices to make.
Mhm.
But you know, even, and I'm not advocating this yet, even if we pushed all the way to number 4, you know, we're talking about going to adding potentially $250 to $300 to a $250,000 house in the district. And I guess just looking kind of at what the increases would look like and knowing what's happening in property values in neighboring districts that are making choices much tougher than we have to make at this point. Looking at how much those property values are dropping and how rapidly they're dropping, I realize none of us want to spend more money than we absolutely have to keep things going, but it just, the original 98-cent number doesn't seem sufficient to do everything we needed to do.
No, it's not.
Does it, but it has to be balanced with what's feasible and what isn't. And even at 98 cents, it was only at 47% on the survey. I think we have to be pragmatic and go at it at something, we really do and sell this thing the best we can, but have something that is sellable.
I think we're putting a lot of stock in that survey, and I think we
Yeah.
have to determine if we believe it or
Exactly.
if we're skeptical of it, right?
I am skeptical of that survey, but that's just my own personal
I'm skeptical
opinion.
the other way. I think it could be worse than.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think we're maxed out. I mean, I think 98 is unreasonable. I think we can get a lot of things done, and we have a good chance of actually passing. And if we don't at the 98, you know, then we gotta look at the 83 struggles before getting smaller referendums passed. I hope the community likes what we're doing and they support it. I want to do it one time and get it right, not hate going back. You know, why'd you ask for 1.6, you know, and now you want 1.4? Get it passed.
Do you think that the fact that we have every school district's worst nightmare taking place in front of us? I mean, I don't want to make this sound overly dramatic, but
It's reality.
it's reality.
Right, we all understand that.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, this is not a situation, the situation in Palmyra-Eagle is not something that's happening in a closed-off area where nobody's, it's everywhere on the news, it's going to become more prevalent. And I guess, you know, one of the things I've always felt is even when I disagreed with people in town, when we've had competing priorities, we've had different opinions on things, there's always been a basic small-town common sense that comes into play. And, you know, I don't think a lot of people really have understood, and maybe still don't understand, but we're going to come to over the next few months, come to understand the reality that this is the challenge districts are facing now. And this could happen to us under the wrong circumstances. And you know, again, we're talking about really extravagant things like making sure roofs don't leak and making sure we have efficient lighting to try and push down operational costs going forward. We've talked about the auditorium a lot of times. We're not trying to build an auditorium here. We're just trying to keep the lights on and the kids warm and dry.
And I totally agree. I think that does help us in getting something passed. But there's also, I believe, a limit to what we can get passed.
I think this is pretty well need-based. There's no wants in
No.
this. I think that's what a lot of the community doesn't want us to pursue is wants. You know, I think we can sell it as needs way better than any kind of want.
I think one of the hardest parts is that we feel like we have one shot here, or the problem gets worse.
Yes.
And so we want to make our one shot as effective as it can be this time. Not rely on a second shot or a third shot or whatever.
I'd be comfortable at the number 2 level personally. I don't think anything above that has a strong chance of passing. Just my personal opinion.
Kind of the old head or the heart question, right?
Who's got a coin?
Yeah, I personally probably would be okay with the number 2 also. In the format, like you have it laid out here, with some towards operational and
Flexibility.
primarily maintenance.
Right.
It has the flexibility in there.
I think it's crucial. I couldn't agree more that these are tangible projects, and I think a majority of things have to go towards the tangible projects because they're tangible, needed projects, right? But I think we need to have that flexibility within the question and be upfront with people on the purpose, and that is that as the structural deficit increases without changes, that some of these dollars are going to be utilized towards helping to at least reduce the structural deficit, not at all take care of, but reduce. I think that's going to be vitally important too, or else we're going to be putting a lot into maintenance, and we're going to be making too large of reductions on the operational sides, and that'll harm our district also. I think tonight, if the board elects to go forward with a resolution, and I'll be frank, I hope that something does come out tonight for us to at least come up with language, and then we can decide in December, you guys can decide whether or not you ultimately support that language, right? I think timing is very important now, as we know, right? The timing of the December meeting is very crucial if we want to provide an April question to our community for them to decide. I think what does need to happen, and I don't mean to put extra stress and pressure on you, but I really do believe this, and if it means we need to come back on a special meeting in another night, then we do so. But it is the five of you agreeing on the resolution question. I don't mean to put pressure on you, but I think we all know how important it is to have you guys agree in the end. I mean, it's vitally crucial. And from somebody who has to go with you and talk about it, it's very difficult when there's not a 5-0 vote and people go, okay, so let's talk about that 4-1 or 3-2 vote. We're spending more time about that than we are the need. And I think just to make people understand, they need to understand the process, they need to understand the need, and then that is really easy to talk about the solution then, right? And I'm not saying it's easy to support one way or the other because I don't know their personal finances, but it's simple then for them to understand. You've done a process, you focused on the need, and that's how this board got to the solution. Got it. Now the ball's in your court to decide whether you did like to vote.
And the five of us all agreeing on it, we're all stakeholders in that as well. It affects
Could agree
us
more, yes.
as much as it does you. So
Yes.
if you elected us to do a job that's best in the
Yes.
district and the community, that's what we're doing.
And I understand the difficulty. Whatever comment you make, as we said, we've had more time to digest, we've been working it, right? And we go, I mean, and we think we want to address as much as we can, right? Because they're all interchangeable to a certain degree. They impact the district. Don't address maintenance, it impacts it, right? Don't address things that on the structural deficit from an operational side, it impacts it. And the hard thing is not knowing exactly, so what will get reduced. I understand that. But to make those comments now, right? I mean, I think what we would show people is, well, here's what has been reduced in the last 10 years plus. We would show that, right, on all sides of the spectrum, from staffing to programming to what we've done in insurance to what we had done in salary. We would show that we've been trying to, and obviously each and every year what we're proud of is we have balanced the budget. We have not operated, I mean, and we've been avoiding going into that fund balance, which unfortunately one of our neighboring districts that we're referring to, I mean, that's the reason they're at where they're at, is they're saying, look, it's just logistics and semantics of clearly you can see by 2021, that school year, with what our projected deficit is, with us utilizing the end of our fund balance, the end, they will be in a deficit. I mean, they are doing the end of their fund balance. So I think, but I think you guys bring up all very viable points. You've heard me say this every year I've been here, whenever we have to talk about a referendum, and that is, referendums are emotional to begin with. I think the big thing is for us to try our best to, they're going to be emotional, and they should. We should care about a lot of things in a referendum. Kids primarily, to be quite frank. But I think it's really important knowing that, the East Troy Community District, the East Troy community knows that, as we stated when we passed the last capital, we will be coming back in due time when there's a need. And I think, that's again what we'd be communicating, when there's the need. And if somebody would push me, I could show them when that need probably would be, because there's already the need, even if this were to get approved, the need's there. But I think there's a lot of credibility to be said in regards to what we believe the community will support in April too, like really support, where we feel very, very confident about it. Going up to 2 million, there's a need there. There's an absolutely, to anybody, we could do 2 million and that still doesn't cover everything on our structural deficit and our maintenance side. So let's not say, oh, if we did 2 million, it gets everything. It still doesn't. It doesn't get all our maintenance and it doesn't get our structural deficit covered. But it also would be a huge compound if we used all of it to that, right? So I think there has to be that balance of thinking about, so if we were to come back in 5 years if things don't change, what are we able to talk to the community about? And how did we show that we utilized the funds, but we also made some tougher decisions, hopefully tougher ones that don't affect programming and kids directly, but might. But then we talk about that and we share that. And that's why we need, and that's why we're back. I just feel we have to give ourselves the best chance at passing in April too. And I think our needs really demonstrated already. I think we've got to also line that really well with the community from a standpoint of what's maybe doable, even though we think maybe we could give them if we talked a lot about the 2 million, would they understand it? Maybe. But it does present a little more of a question, right? The needs are there, I don't doubt that. But I don't know if the support over the impact is there. And I would be worried without it, the more damage that would be done to our district with the issues that we'd have to address, right? Now we're not getting to our maintenance at all, and we're having to address that 400,000 straight up. Straight up. I mean, we don't have anything to assist it. And that could have a bigger impact on our enrollment, to be honest, even though we're like, okay, we'll come back. It could be a pretty big impact for that year.
So it's one between 2 and 3. I would like to say 3 because then we can maybe get just a little bit more support. But if that doesn't go, if that doesn't end up passing, then we have to dial it back.
I definitely lean towards 3 as well. And I think you and I are in very similar thought process, and that's what I'm struggling with too. Again, it's the practicality of
2 is a viable option, but 3 is the better.
3 allows us to do more of what needs to be done. But if it doesn't get through, we get to do none of it.
Right. And we face that with whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4.
That's where I think 2 is kind of that in-between option that has a decent chance based on the survey, which I know it might not be accurate, but that's all we have to go on. It's the only thing we have based on that, and it does make a big dent in what needs to be done.
Well, I think it is important, as much as I tend to lean towards 3, I think it is important to remember that the ad hoc committee was supportive of the 98-cent increase. So,
And hopefully that committee is the one that's going to be helping us push this thing in the community. If that's what they believe, that's what they'll be pushing for.
The process has shown that we have it heavily on our minds, that we care about what people can afford in our community. We're not 5 people sitting up here. Let's try to get the most amount of money we can, and we're being responsible about this. And I think that number 2, falls in a comfortable spot. I think gives East Troy School District an opportunity to show that they, support the schools in a way that they can hopefully afford and can get behind, the maintenance and stuff. That's an actual need. It's not,
Frivolous. It's not wasteful either.
With that, like Chris said, in 5 years, it would show, hey, we did get this stuff done, and we balanced budgets for another 5 years, and we're still doing good.
I'd like to believe we built a lot of credibility on the last referendum with the overall limited tax impact from what we were projecting. It was able to be brought in even much lower, right? That's always a great message, and you get worried about that, about whether or not will you really be able to live up to the projection. And we were able to bring in much lower. Besides that, I think the projects work, all the project work that got done throughout our district for the amount of funds that we had and the quality, right? I'll never forget when people walk through the high school or Little Prairie and hearing them go, wow, this is unbelievable. And even one individual saying, I'll never forget hearing him say, this was for that same price, right, that we approved of. Yeah, we couldn't go above that. I'd like to believe that credibility was built there, right? Integrity, intentions, and we got the results. I would like to believe that carries over to our discussion and now what we're sharing, right? That there's trust and understanding in what we're saying, what we're acknowledging. We're demonstrating truly tangible needs. We're demonstrating the structural deficit. We're showing them the deficit, and we're even being upfront, very much showing them here's the referendum impact, and here's the impact with the additional 2 to 3% estimated tax impact that we have annually, that we believe. I mean, it might be less than that. You never know, right? could be more, but it might be less, so.
So I can be talked into number 2, with the caveat that for the next 2 years, you're gonna have to tolerate my questions and my feedback about what else we're doing beyond raising mill rate when it comes to working with the village to increase affordable housing. And we just had this conversation as a side note. How do we bring more young families in? How do we increase the tax base and do it in a way that's beneficial to the entire tax base? How do we get out and publicize? At the last meeting, we had great discussions about some of the programs at the high school. How do we go out and publicize those things? You know, this, at the end of the day, this is what's going to end up in the newspaper. They're going to want to talk about what the mill rate is, what the referendum is, and they should. But at the same point in time, then, I think we need to continue to find ways to not just be creative, but to tell the story. Because I think there are an awful lot of things that are going on here that are very, very positive, and I think we're a rural district that's sandwiched in between some bigger, very attractive districts. We are always going to have to fight twice as hard as those districts do. But we got to be prepared to do it, and we got to take it to them.
And I think one of the things, Bob, not to jump way ahead, because let's stay on topic, right? That's pretty funny that I'm going to say that. But, I can laugh at myself better anyway. But within your packets, there was a lot of information on the framework of communication, you know, and where we've gone and where we're taking and where we're going to continue to take it. So we have not taken that lightly. We've been taking it quite seriously, and I know everybody in every department and every building has been taking it to heart and very seriously, to the degree that we can, due to the fact that we're not communication majors and we're, you know, and it's not a full-time job itself, but we understand that, and I couldn't agree more with you. There's much to proclaim in this district, much. One of the things we keep saying, and you've noticed it on a lot of stuff that we're sending out, small community, big education. And I think there's a plus to both of those. Small community, big education.
So do we want to make a motion? Anybody?
We just have to make a motion that we're going to get the verbiage correct.
To the verbiage of the resolution, Coach, so you might want to work through that, so
The
when we
framework,
talk to
basically,
legal
on
counsel,
review
so
type thing.
it would be, if you want to keep working through the verbiage, so working through, okay, are you coming to an agreement on the amount? And then let's work through the verbiage in regards, and Kathy's been talking to legal counsel, so she might be able to help us on that verbiage, but because the amount was kind of a big thing that we needed, right? But Kathy, do you have a little bit of the verbiage from Allison by chance?
Yes.
And then they could work off that verbiage. You guys can decide if you like that verbiage, you want to work off it differently a little bit. And then from there, that's what your action motion would be tonight, is somebody making a motion on going forward with developing a resolution question. And let's get that verbiage down tonight. So you're not approving the resolution.
Right, I think we're pretty set though on the amount of dollars we'd be requesting in the years going forward. That was pretty much a given.
Chris,
Yeah.
5 years, is that?
That's what the ad hoc recommended. Yeah. Sorry, Steve, is that what you're going to say?
No, I just,
Where that
I
came
remember
from?
the referendum when we were doing that, 1.1, was that for 4 years? That ran out a few years ago?
You mean the 345,000?
Yeah, 345, was that for 4 years?
That was 5 years back
That was
then.
5 years.
Yeah, those were 2 5-year ones. So those were both 5 years. I think they did expire in 11. It was 1 to 6 and 6 to 11. So, and then that was the discussion at the ad hoc about recurring, non-recurring years, and the ad hoc recommended, instead of 3, they said, look, not a recurring, but a non-recurring with a 5-year. So they did want to extend it over 3, but they wanted to pass 3 at least, they said.
So here's the draft from the attorney. Shall the East Troy Community School District, Walworth, and Waukesha Counties, Wisconsin be authorized to exceed the revenue limit specified in section 121.91 Wisconsin statutes by, and then your amount, so like 1.4, 1.6 per year, beginning with the 2020-21 school year and ending with the And I thought that's not bad.
That
Again,
would be good.
Yeah.
I don't wanna promise people, because again, we are gonna have to do cuts, like we said,
Right.
every year. So I don't wanna promise people again that there are no cuts, but the money would be used for those three things. It would be used for maintenance, it would be used for the safety and security upgrades, and it would be used to help maintain some of that, so.
But we probably couldn't add the words "to help" in the
Right.
resolution,
Not-
right? Obviously, that's a dialogue verbiage you can have in presentations,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but it would be, but I'm with Kat, I like the word, and we did notice that in quite a few other referendum questions of surrounding districts, they use the word maintain.
Does it matter at all the order and how that is said? I mean, I know practically it doesn't, it's just
Practically
one
it
question,
doesn't.
but since we're putting most of the money towards maintenance, then security, and then operating, should it be in that order?
I agree.
Yeah.
If you use the word maintain operations, that connotates that you're not gonna cut any operations.
See, that's what I'm worried about.
Right,
Yeah.
that's why I don't, that
To assist in
bothers me in there,
maintaining.
because if we need to cut something,
Could we do that to assist in maintaining? I wonder if they would allow it, we can ask Allison. But that's true, I mean, if we could say something to assist to maintain, I mean, it's not gonna maintain it.
right.
Could it be to maintain to the greatest degree possible?
I'll see what she says.
Or operations maintenance.
That would imply that it would be covering all of it, though, or
That
not
might be
covering it all.
confusing too.
Or maintain to.
So let's think about this, so if Allison were to say none of that verbiage in the resolution, which I think there's a good chance, to be honest, right? I'm just taking a guess. Where do you wanna go with it? You wanna go back to operations then, and then it's just an explanation?
It's a little open-ended.
We have to do it through the FAQs and presentations and everything else, right?
What does operations mean?
Because it probably is, and if we cannot, and where I'm going with it is if she says, well, you can put in the word maintain operations, but you guys added a lot of other verbiage, which I think to clarity, and I get it. Because I agree with you, Steve, it could be misleading that people think we're gonna maintain it, like Kathy said, and we might not be able to maintain, right? So,
Can we offset some operations? Like, use the verbiage as to offset some operations?
what I was wondering is if she only agrees to the verbiage that you guys recommended, if she only agrees to maintain, I think we should just do operations. Not maintain operation, like if your additional verbiage can't be used that you all offered up, then I don't think we say, but she says, well, you could do say maintain operations. I want your guys' opinion on it, but I think you'd be better off to have it developed with operations and not maintain
Keep it
operations.
simple.
We can explain.
And we
what
explain
operations
it, we
mean.
explain what that means.
Right.
We explain, most referendums, that is what it's about, is you're explaining the resolution question, the Dayton's, the specificity of it, the specifics of everything that's going into it. So you're not gonna get all that in the resolution question anyway.
The order, again, was maintenance though?
Yeah.
Then operations, then safety and security?
No, maintenance,
Security,
safety,
safety,
security, and then operations.
See, and I look at it as the last thing that's read is the thing they remember the most. That's kind of why I like security at the end, because I think that appeals to the most amount of people. Just, you go through
That
those.
was the highest, as far as the
Security was
survey anyways.
Survey.
Yeah.
I think the word security is gonna stand out the most no matter where it is.
True.
That's the way I was in school, last thing I read. Do you wanna have the?
In reality, that's probably,
Security
as
at the
if you
end?
look at the three pots of money, kind of the way it's
So
laid out.
maintenance,
It is in that order,
operations,
security at the
and
end.
security? Yeah, just in our presentations, we'll demonstrate through Bob's saying, right, I mean, in each and every one of these, security was in that first year. I mean, it's getting done in the maintenance, it's in the first year of it. So that was not where are you putting it in the 5 years? No, first thing. So, okay.
So are we just saying security, we're not saying middle security?
Well, I don't wanna limit it, right?
Bob,
I don't wanna
no,
limit it.
because you want, because of other additional
There are
possible
some
things
other-
within the
yeah,
project.
You don't know
we
what
do.
happens 2 or 3
Yeah.
years from now, we
Yeah.
need to do some security.
Yeah,
issues
that would
at the
be-
high
I
school
agree.
or-
So 3 words,
Right.
maintenance, security, and operations.
Are we-
Simple as that.
Are we gonna
Or
put
security
at the bottom,
last or whatever,
Just
yeah.
in the interest of the way words flow, and it is sort of in alphabetical order if we do maintenance, operations, and safety and security. I mean, it is, if safety and security is the last thing that people are gonna read anyway, that is the last thing in our
Yeah.
agenda question, right?
Maintenance, operations and security.
MOS.
Do you want safety and security or just security?
Safety and security.
Yes.
I'm looking at you, Bob, too, yes.
Yeah.
safety and security. And the amount was gonna be the 1.6 you want in the resolution,
Yes.
right?
And then we will try to get something in there about maintaining operations without implying that it's fully covering maintaining.
The lawyers are probably good at coming up with words for that.
Yeah.
Right.
But if that can't be explained clearly enough, then they're saying we'll just stick with operation.
Can we get a motion to that effect?
Yeah,
I'll
I
make
made
a,
it.
go ahead.
You made a motion. We heard you.
and it can be the development of the resolution, so the motion should say that.
Okay,
The development.
so I'll make a motion for the development of the resolution question for the amount of 1.6 million over the 5 years for maintenance, operations, and safety and security.
Second that.
Any other discussion? 2 hours of it, going on quite. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And I
So
know
we're
that,
saying that. April.
yeah,
Put it out there, Steve, put it out there.
and I know that was a lot for tonight, but between tonight and the next meeting, can you look over that? So Chris mentioned we gave you like a long communications framework document. That's separate from the referendum. That's just us internally working on who's got what different communications responsibilities for everything. But then there were 2 different, like 2-pagers behind that. One was specifically referendum communications, and the other was like thoughts and process, like a guidelines document with referendum. Could you just read that before the next board meeting? And if there's anything to add on the referendum communications roadmap, something that you want us to do differently, if that's the kind of stuff, I think we'd like to get that communications plan approved in the next board meeting, right?
Yeah, the roadmap, we definitely want your feedback by the next meeting. Due to the fact, as you can see, if you looked at it at all, if you had a chance, we, obviously, there's already been work done. We're not talking the framework anymore, right? There's been a ton of stuff done on communications in the framework about how we're, what we're trying to do to market things more, share the information, all the various responsibilities. But now we're talking referendum. That's a totally separate communications, right? Totally separate than the marketing of our district. I mean, the referendum roadmap is what we're asking for in December, that you really take a serious look at for us and provide us feedback, because we're already gonna be meeting this, we already have been, but we're meeting now to talk about, okay, so what do we, what do we wanna share, when do we wanna share it, core team, everything. And that's not to say that the resolution's getting passed in December by this group. I understand that there still needs to be dialogue about that resolution, it's just being developed. But what we are doing is sharing of the process between now and December. So at our next December meeting, just so you're well aware, I don't want the board to be shocked for this, but when you looked at that roadmap, or if you did, or if you will after tonight, you'll see that there's a lot of communication that we're doing between tomorrow already and our next board meeting to tell people what has been done. What has been done, what is being done, what our December board meeting's about, and what's gonna be done possibly at the December board meeting, so people can understand. I mean, we're sharing the information. So, just so you know, so we're not waiting till December to say, okay, it's your feedback on the months of December and January and February if we move forward. Is there anything else that we haven't thought of in those months that we want your feedback on? But we won't wait till then, right? We have a lot of work to do already in the next month that we'll be sharing.
And that starts on page 65 at the end of the month. The one other piece I'll say though is when the attorney drafts these questions now, it gets on kind of legal format with signatures will be due at the next board meeting. So if anybody has any inkling like, oh, we should have done X, we should have done Y, we really would have to call a special board meeting between now and like, I think it's the 18th possibly is our 16th or 18th, I December 16th.
Yeah.
So, get a hold of Chris and say, I'm really having second thoughts, we really do need to call another board meeting because those questions will be drafted, they will be on the documents. And we've had some meetings before where it was like, well, could we go lower now? For example, if you want to go 1.4 instead of 1.6, and we're sitting at the meeting and we have these, again, formally drafted documents, and we're wondering, can we? I know you can't go higher anymore at that point. Like if we were sitting here on December 16th and said, oh, really, let's go for 1.8, like at that point in time, again, can't change it. We would have to have one meeting before the December meeting. Does that make sense?
Yep.
You guys did a really good job. I mean, people have, those are hard topics and hard dialogues and discussions. And I mean, I think people have a greater appreciation for that dialogue that has to happen in open session amongst the public. That's the whole idea, right? A board meeting is in the public, right? But I mean, it's hard dialogue, hard decisions. Good job.
All right, we're ready to move on. Next item, approval of policy 346,
Yeah.
district assessment policy.
One of the things, I'm not sure, on the back page, you guys have like the continuum I see. So I noticed that today when I was going through everything. So if you could, this is just the back page. It's the last couple paragraphs got, so on your page 71, that should have been 72 that I'm handing out, just so you know, all right? So, so this is the final reading. Haven't made any changes since our first reading. I think this is a very important policy. Amy's done a great job going over it. She's not here tonight, so now it's my opportunity to ruin it. This is, so I'll try to have her come back with the utmost confidence in myself tomorrow. I just can't say enough about this policy. When we've been talking about that we are not about trying to make students, we're trying to make learners, and I know that's a very general statement in a way, but I think there's a lot of strong subject and verbiage behind that statement when you think about the difference between a student and a learner. And so with this assessment policy is getting at what we've been talking about for the last few years, and been working on PD, and been working on classroom practices and aligning systems and practices. We're not fully there. We recognize that. This is a work in progress. But what it is about is this is a policy that's supporting saying we are about making sure that we're working toward having learner-empowered environments. Empowered environments that focus on allowing kids alternative assessments. And some of those can be the traditional forms of assessments, but some of them might be additional other assessments where they have more of a voice, where they're doing project-based learning, where they're able to come up with their own project instead of being told what project to do, as long as it's always aligned to learning targets, right? That we're not all operating differently. We're all having the same common learning targets, but we may present how we understand those learning targets differently now, instead of one person, to be quite frank, the facilitator or teacher, always deciding how that gets represented, right? The facilitator or teacher just wants to ensure, do you understand and know the learning targets? Can you represent them? Okay, well, with that being said, let's offer some more flexibility on those assessment practices. I think the most powerful part of this whole document isn't necessarily the flexible assessment practices. I think it's on the page I handed out that was not attached, and that is on that back page. And I think the most powerful part is at the top in the final two sentences. That besides the assessment continuum, I think it's furthermore, assessment practices provide extended opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning. Doing so keeps the child at the center of the learning, and it provides an accurate representation of what has been learned. And I think those are very strong two sentences. The administrative team knows I've been stressing that to them when they're talking to their staffs at staff developmental meetings. Those two sentences are crucial when we're looking at reflecting on our own practices. Do our current practices truly keep a child at the center of the learning, which is our personalized learning policy you guys approved 3 years ago. That we said everything would be about the child being at the center of the learning. That it's not about necessarily when they're learning, but that they're learning. And that we represent that learning. Because we all recognize that students learn differently, and they come to us with different readiness, and they learn at different readiness. So if we really believe that, and I've never had a debate with anybody on that, that students have different interests, different passions, have different readiness when they come to us at 4K, and they have different readiness as they go through our entire system in different disciplines, then how are we representing that? How are we helping kids to develop that confidence and represent that learning rather than treating them all the same? And that they should always be representing the same learning at the same time, when that's not real life at all. So I think these two sentences are very important, and what I'm going at is that final sentence about accurate representation of what has been learned. Why do I state that? The elephant in the room, right? Our next heavy discussion and topic, which is already beginning to happen at buildings, is grading. And it's how we represent accurate reporting of learning. It's not how do we give kids all these additional chances to learn. It's how do we represent accurate learning, right? There's a difference in how I just said that. And making sure that whatever practices we're doing, it's encouraging and supporting kids to make sure that they understand, support at home, to be quite frank, or if they're not ready. We're not going to allow any of those factors to come into play. We're going to make sure we provide the necessary support and represent accurate learning of that time. And we're going to take away all the other external variables that are really questionable. I've had some people debate me on, Hibner, are you not, I like when they say doctor, but sometimes it's not just Hibner. Hibner, are you not saying that effort's not important in school? Oh yeah, it is. It's an important skill in life. It's very important in school. It's very important in life. Effort's very important. Time management, very important. Prioritization, very important. Self-reflection, very important. Goal setting, very important. All those things are very important. I've never said they're not. What I'm saying is, when we represent learning though, I don't want it to be about, I do not want it to be about compliance. Compliance is not learning. Compliance is I'm getting things done, I'm playing the game of school, and I'm getting points because I turned my paper in on time. We shouldn't care as much about, if I give Silas here 25 extra points for turning his paper in on time, that does not mean Silas learned the learning targets at all. He might not understand any of the learning targets, but I'm giving him 25 points like he does. That I should recognize Silas somewhere in my narrative or on a different area that his effort's really good. He turns things in on time. He's trying to get his work done. But don't let's misrepresent, is he learning it or is he not? Right? Those things are separate. Like me, reporting out his effort should be shown. And showing out whether or not he gets things on time should be shown. Those are important skills. We should represent that, because if he's not good at that, I think he needs to know that. We need to work on that. His parents need to know it, and everyone else needs to. We need to work on that. But it doesn't necessarily represent, if Silas really only knows 75% of that learning target, but I gave him 25 extra points because he got working on time for me, and now I represent to Silas, you got 100 on it. He doesn't know that those learning targets at 100%. He knew them at 75%. You're totally misrepresenting his learning. I'm not, that is not accurate representation. I'm not saying we're there. What I'm telling you is, those are the dialogues we're going to start to happen. And I'm not saying that it will be represented exactly the way I just represented it. That's why it's going to be dialogue and us discussing. And us doing a lot of readings, a lot of research on people who have been spending their life on these topics. But I think that's the next thing to come out of the assessment component, is my point. So I just want to represent that. When we say accurate representation, that's what we'll be talking about next. Like, how do we represent all of that accurately? And they're all important, but how do we represent them accurately without misrepresenting different components inaccurately too? So just so you're aware, I mean, I think those will be the heavy topics to come forward. And I won't be leading that. I mean, I will be a part of it. That'll be the student learning department with Amy and Sarah and Jody and others and all the building level principals. They'll be leading it with their team leaders, and their team leaders will be talking with the departments. And I want to extend out to all the building level administration already. They've done an extremely great job. They've been having some really good in-depth dialogue with their team leaders and their team leaders with their overall teams in regards to looking at like their syllabuses and looking at their current practices and going, okay, so how do our current, what do we do with our current practices? How do we assess kids? How do we grade kids? How do we determine how much we're putting forth into everything? And they're taking some honest, really good self-reflection right now and auditing their current assessment methods, their current grading methods. And we're starting to have some really good dialogue about, does that keep the child at the center of learning? Does that practice accurately represent learning? Does that practice encourage a child to continue to learn more, or does it discourage them? Does that build confidence or hurt their confidence? All those things. Does it hold them accountable, or are we allowing them to be not held accountable by, oh, well, that's their choice and we're just letting them, well, that's fine, but it's not okay for us to say, well, it's their choice so they don't learn. We're responsible for the learning stuff. I mean, there's a lot of kids who would be fine with going through the system and not learning. I hate to tell you that. There are kids like that. That's not okay for us to say that was their choice and let them go through the system. That's still gonna have an impact later on in life on all of us. So, those are the things we're having discussions and dialogues on, and credit to each one of them when I look at them, because they're having that dialogue right now, and nobody's stating clearly it's gotta be this way. What we're having is, let's think about that. Let's think about that practice. And I think the teams are really, and honestly, from even some of the verbiage I've already read from last year to this year, they're having some good in-depth discussions on thinking about what their practices are. I think back to my practices when I was in the classroom, and I can tell you what, my practice would be a lot better. A lot.
Voting on this tonight?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the policy 346 as presented.
I'll second.
Hey, discussion.
Where does the page you gave us, where does that fall in?
71, called 71.
I know, but
Yeah.
would that be 3? Like this paragraph here, it's not like labeled like a number or letter? Just trying to figure out where that falls.
Amy put that after 2, so it's still part of 2, a paragraph. You'll see 3 is after it, Tony.
Yeah.
So the assessment of students is 3 and then 4. So that paragraph on the back end that I was saying is one of the most important paragraphs, is just, yeah, that's the next.
That's another dot.
Still, yeah, it's in subsection of 2 still.
It's a format issue.
Yeah.
Great, any other discussion? All right, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, approval of policy 551, leaves policy.
And nothing's changed here at all. You know, as we've gone through a long time ago, well, where this came from in regards to giving a little more flexibility to consideration of an individual requesting personal leave during the week of in-service, especially in August. As we stated, I think it is just strictly in August. So we, as you guys all stated, to come up with verbiage that would honestly allow that to be considered. I think we've done that, and that is, it's just an additional exemption that could be considered on the personal leave, but there's quite a few stipulations and requirements for even consideration to be done. But at least it's there as a consideration. So I'm satisfied with the language, and if you guys are, I'd like to have that recommended for approval so we can begin to implement that with our staff.
I'll make a motion to approve policy 551.
I'll second.
All right, discussion? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is presentation of service project by FCCLA.
That's
Family
gonna-
Career Community Leaders of America.
You bet. That's going to be tabled possibly, you think, December, January, Stace?
Yeah,
December?
probably December, yeah.
December, okay.
I'll make a motion to table.
Second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Notice of school board election.
Yeah, I need to read this again for informational purposes. So, notice is hereby given that an election to be held in the East Troy Community School District on Tuesday, April 7, 2020. The following office is to be elected to succeed the present incumbents listed. The candidates receiving the highest number of votes will fill the regular term up for election and serve a 3-year term beginning April 27, 2020 and ending the 4th Monday in April 2023. School board member up is Stephen Lamberts for a 3-year term. Notice is further given that a campaign registration statement and a declaration of candidacy must be filed no later than 5 o'clock p.m. on Tuesday, January 7, 2020 in the office of the school district clerk. If nomination papers are required, the first day to circulate nomination papers is December 1st, 2019, and the final day for filing nomination papers is 5:00 p.m. on Tuesday, January 7, 2020, in the office of the school district clerk. Notice is further given that if a primary is necessary, the primary will be held on Tuesday, February 18, 2020. A description of the school district boundaries can be obtained from the school district office.
All right, next item, budget enrollment projections activity.
This was the part I was referring to earlier that was really. So thank you all for first of all completing this, like personality quiz. About how you felt about certain budget projections. And I realize now, after doing it one time, I could have added a few more things. I could have added your sensitivity for tax levy increases. I could have added how you feel about teacher salaries. So at a minimum, those two. But you can see I have different tabs here, and then I had them in your packets. Admin, board, and then a combined look. And I don't have who answered what for the purpose of confidentiality, but I do have, you can see here what the set of answers were. So down in the right-hand corner, like one person answered a 2, then a 3, then a 3, then a 4, then a 2. So those were our 5 board members. And what you can see then is for every topic, like how conservative do we want our enrollment projection to be? We have an average, we have a median, and we have a mode computation happening. Okay? For this graphic, I like it then when we can take the numbers and make them visual. We use the average. And so what we have going on here is like enrollment. The average of the 5 of you board members sitting here was just barely into the 3. So, and if you recall, what we're trying to do here again is, when we create this Baird model, the one that gives me how much we have to reduce every year, it's driven upon assumptions. And the assumptions we as a district put in. You can put in, very conservative assumptions, and you can put in not so conservative assumptions. And I'll tell you, the business manager who has now left Palmyra, she would say to me in the business manager meeting, say to the group of business managers, the hardest part about all of this is it's the assumptions and the numbers I put into the model, and I hope they're right. And I hope that that's why, we're saying we can't operate anymore. So there is a lot, again, you want your numbers to be accurate and you want your numbers to be reflective, but it is, you're trying to make, how should we project? Should we project flat enrollment the same as last year? Or should we project that we're gonna lose enrollment in all grades? How, again, severe should we come up with these numbers? Chris and I were having a conversation today too, and again, the angst and the emotion going on at Palmyra, they are saying like, well, the projections ended up not even being as right. It seemed like it always got worse. And they said, well, then we would make cuts, and then we would lose more kids because of the cuts we made. So then you're always again like reassessing your enrollment and your trends. So again, very hard. But where we landed as a board, use an average enrollment projection, which within this model, there's a ton of tabs, and one of the tabs that Baird provides is using your 5-year historical enrollment data, which includes normally there's a bump up at 6th grade and a bump up at 9th grade, for example. That's what it means to be to look at the cohort and to look at the history. It analyzes grades where students enter or where you might be losing students. So 8th grade, it might not be the 5th graders coming over to 6th grade, but there might be like a 1.2 average increase instead of just a 1.0 average increase. So you said use that one. And again, what I tried to do was in the 16 years I've been doing some of this is which ones end up being more conservative methods, which ones end up being less conservative methods. You can add on the scale. So you ended up at an average of a 3. Open enrollment, you ended up at an average. Remember, this year we had a horrible open enrollment out here. You know, and I was again kicking myself going, oh, now I'm $200,000 short in September. I should have projected more over here. But you guys said to me, nah, you know, let's not, again, be this one, because what happens is then you can make too many cuts. Let's be more average. Let's do, analyze again that 5-year trend. And for us, the 5-year trend is projecting out an additional 11 open enrollment students out. And then the next one was state budget cycle. And you were leaning more to projecting $200 per student. So that's what I put in the model, was $200 per student. And again, this was something that we created this year, brand new. So I realized as we were going that even though I asked you to also comment on how do you want the spring budgeting process to go? Do you want no reductions? Do you want average reductions? Do you want a lot of reductions to be extremely conservative again? And then the next line, you know, long-term philosophy, where do you want that to land? I realized that these first 3 that we put colors towards, colors, these are like your inputs. These are your outputs. So theoretically, again, based upon what you select up here, like if you select, I want to have average enrollment, average open enrollment numbers, average state budget process, you should end up with average reductions and this kind of an output. Likewise, if you were like, oh, I'm only comfortable being very conservative, well, then you're going to end up cutting a lot, and you might have this kind of outcome. So really what can't happen is I want to be super conservative in the numbers, put in, you know, a great deal of conservative numbers, but then let's not have any reductions.
I mean, that's the kind of the nice thing to say, but it's not going to happen.
Right. And again, that's the point, because I think we all are like, oh, yeah, we want to be conservative with the numbers. But then come spring, we don't want to cut a lot of staff, and we want to give raises, and we don't want to, you know, reduce a lot of insurance. So knowing what inputs equal what outputs, in general, I thought was like a really important aha. The other aha that I had when I'm compiling the answers here is both groups, whether it be board or administration, were more conservative on the inputs than they were on the outputs. So if you, again, you created the average, we both tended to be more, again, saying we wanted more conservative inputs than what we wanted reality to be about the outcomes. And it wasn't horrible. It wasn't, again, my example of we want 5s and then we want 1s, you know what I mean? But it's still averaged out to that. So the board, like Chris and I say, you are our bosses. So we use these numbers to then turn around and plug into this, which is on page 82, which is your new roll forward Baird forecasting model going forward. So like, again, my tiny print that I need glasses for, we used the Baird cohort enrollment method, projecting forward. We did the open enrollment of plus, I'm sorry, it was 11 I had said here, but the new numbers, when I factored in, again, we got a big bump this year. We're now at 13 on average going out every year. 2% property value increase, I didn't ask you to test that one. $200 per pupil limit, that's here, the $200 state budget amount. And then what did we put in for salary? CPI is trending less than 2% right now, it's about 1.7, 1.8. Our salary model ends up being a bit higher than CPI, usually about 0.5%, so it's 2.5%. A little nervous about that if CPI goes up again, because again, that's a 5-year trend, but right now that's what's in there. 8% health insurance we're sticking with, 3% all other insurance, based upon, again, what our insurance representatives think. We do have the increased special ed aid that is in the second year of the biennial budget factored into the 2021 projection to 30%. It's supposed to be going up to 30%. It's about 26% right now. And that yields the numbers deficit first year 464,000, then after that 501, then after that 533, then after that 480, then after that 367. The numbers that get compounding bigger below those are, again, if you don't make cuts. So a school district that says, oh, we don't have anything to cut, or we're not going to make those cuts at 464. The next year they have a new deficit of 501 plus the 464 for the previous year, so now a deficit of 965. And then the line right underneath it is what you were talking about earlier, what's happening to their fund balance. So you would see if we did not make cuts by 2023-24, we would be broke. We would have no fund balance. We would not be able to operate. And that's why we do make the cuts and balance the budget every year, albeit it's, you know, never an easy process. I did combine on this sheet the administrator and board results, because the other, again, I told you this was a great deal of fun for me. The other really fun part was like, how close are our administrators' perceptions to our board's perceptions? Because the administrators tackle like the, what should we cut? Are we on the same page? And you can see that their enrollment was right in line with yours. Oh, excuse me, I should be on this sheet to do that. The administrators alone, their enrollment was a 3. Their open enrollment was also a 3. They were a little more conservative in the state budget than the board was. So that's where they ended. And then this combined, I forgot what this kind of graph is called, but this was fun because, again, visually you can see the administrators are orange and the board is blue. And like, so here's the state budget. So the administrators, again, were being more conservative with the state budget than the board was. And then some of these other things like open enrollment right in line, enrollment pretty close again to what kind of results in the long term. In the box and whiskers plots, you know, when you again look at the combined, pretty close answers on again those inputs, a bigger discrepancy of answers on the outputs. So more varied responses on what is wanted, you know, in the long-term process and how many reductions should we be making annually. So wider range there, but again, my like aha was, well, it's whatever we select as these 3 inputs, it's going to yield this kind of a spring and long-term budgeting process. That's what's going to occur out there. So any questions on that? And really good for me because I told Chris, I said, for once I didn't run 15 different scenarios, trying to land where we should go. I just said, here's where the board is saying we should go, like the 3s. So that was pretty fun. And like I said, I should have asked you even more. Where do you want teacher salaries to go? Where do you want tax levy to, you know, tax levy is the one you have least control over because the equalization aid can do strange things based upon what other school districts do, based upon how much money is in the pot at the state level. And I don't know if any of you read like what went in the informational piece at the end. There was a little story about a mock school district, and you know, again, I was talking about their levy meeting, and the similarities were again funny for me. So, but one of them is, you know, the business manager saying, I projected X in state aid and it came out Y, because that one you have very little control over individually as a school district and what happens to it. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Kathy.
The teacher salary question would have been interesting.
Yes.
You still may have to do that.
So all questions that add to your future graphs.
There,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
All right, next item, leave of absence request.
Executive session.
Okay, reports. Dr. Edner, do you have anything?
No, I'm going to have something on the communications announcements.
Okay. Kathy, you have anything?
No.
Amy's not here. Kate, anything tonight? Okay. Silas?
Yes, so today, the high school held an assembly for honoring the veterans in our school, community, and across the nation. This past weekend, the high school drama club performed the fall musical, which I heard went pretty well. The high school jazz band performs this Thursday. And then girls basketball starts next Tuesday against Pius in Pius, so can't watch that. The end of the first trimester will be Monday, November 25th. Over that Thanksgiving break, boys basketball will kick off over Thanksgiving break, and then the second trimester begins November the 30th, and then wrestling will start December 5th.
That musical was really, really
Can
good.
I ask you, Silas, how are you liking the trimesters?
It's definitely different change of pace, but I'm handling them well. I think they're okay.
Anybody else have any comments?
That's what I heard.
Thank you.
Tony, you have something?
Oh, I was just saying that musical was really, really good, once again. Always is.
Ditto.
Nice.
I agree.
All right, I have nothing tonight. No policy review and development, communications announcements.
A couple things. Silas beat me to my punch. Good job. Musical was great, so I think thank you very much to everybody who was part of that. And then what Silas had mentioned, just wanted to say thank you to our veterans for Veterans Day. I don't think there can be enough gratitude and recognition to all of the men and women who have been serving for our country, continue to do so or have done so. And then finally, I wanted to provide a little bit of an update on the dissolution with Palmyra-Eagle. I went to the first public hearing last week, Thursday, so I was there for majority afternoon and evening. A lot of emotion, obviously, as one can suspect, in regards to testimonies and people talking. What I wanted to provide tonight wasn't so much opinions or anything. I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about the process, a little bit of what that night. I've been keeping you a little bit in the loop of what's been going on. I think most people have been following the paper, understand the dissolution from a standpoint of Palmyra-Eagle and why they're considering dissolution, and now they're at with the public hearings with the school district boundary board of appeals. But I wanted to explain kind of what that is and what some of the things that went over that were reviewed that night that I was there. I'll be going back again, possibly this Thursday, and then Kathy and I, along with Amy and Kate, will be doing a 30-minute presentation on the 21st of November. We do not have the specific time yet. All 7 surrounding districts will be given an opportunity to do a 30-minute presentation. So I will let you know more about that due to the fact I'm going to find out what other districts are doing from a standpoint, is board president coming to sit with? Are they having board representation? But everybody will be given what we've heard, a 30-minute opportunity for a presentation. So we're trying to understand what does that mean
Is
right
that
now.
trying to sell the district? Is that your 30-minute presentation?
Right now, that's a great question, Stephen. What is the 30-minute presentation? A little bit of the 30-minute, small guidance has been provided to all the surrounding districts is from a standpoint of if the school district boundary appeals board is solely focused on 2 major things, right? That they're focused on the educational welfare of all the Palmyra-Eagle students and the impact on all surrounding districts. So what they want to know a little bit is, okay, so first and foremost, we're concerned most about the Palmyra-Eagle students. So from the East Troy School District in your 30-minute presentation, talk to us about how the Palmyra-Eagle students, if any or all were to come, or if there's a line drawn, and some of them were provided as residency now at East Troy, talk to us about your programming that you offer in East Troy. And is it any different, the same as Palmyra? And obviously we'll talk about everything that is the same that they would provide at Palmyra that we would provide. In the same breath, we'll talk about additional programming maybe that we can provide, but not, obviously this is not, I don't view this, again, my opinion, I don't view this as an opportunity. I mean, they're going through a difficult dissolution. This is not East Troy coming to try and come in and saying, well, this is why everyone should attend East Troy, right? We're just trying to share what East Troy's about, not why we're better than Palmyra-Eagle or anything else. This is difficult. So we are not trying to sell, we're trying to share the information. With that being said, so I think they'll look at programming, they'll want to look at boundaries from a standpoint of where do you think a line should be drawn, and that will be so theoretical, but some of that's going to be based upon what Kath and I have discussed, and we've been discussing with our attorneys, is probably a rationalization of, come up with a rationalization, right, of where do students currently, like from Palmyra-Eagle, that attend East Troy, where do a majority of them live right now? Show us. And then within that line, if we were to fabricate a line, what would that look like for your district, right? So I think all districts are gonna come in there fabricating a line to a degree, going, look, the line's been drawn for us, so we're just gonna come up rationally with a line, and then we'll talk to them about not only what it does for, if those number of kids came to our district, more than that, right? What do we have for space? What do we have for availability? What could it mean for staffing? And then, what would that mean from a standpoint? That's what Kathy and I were asking the attorneys today, which they're gonna have to get back on. It's like, okay, so this fabricated line, what's it mean for equalized value? Like, how do we even calculate that out? And so they're, you know, right, this is not a guarantee. This is them wanting to know an idea of how it would impact and what have you done to demonstrate that. We're trying to work with some of the surrounding districts. Kathy's been working with some of the business managers on whether or not, will there be a couple key components that all of us will do the same presentation topic on. Like, okay, we're all gonna present the programming, will we all present on this? Are we all gonna draw a line? I don't know if that'll all be the same by all 7 districts or not. I'm hoping that a majority of us can come to an agreement that, look, can we agree on certain topics that we're all gonna present, so they're hearing the same information, at least on the topic, and then they'll hear the different information on how it impacts each district, but same topic at least, right? I'm not saying we'll get all 7 to agree to that. I think it would be nice. I think if they wanted that to happen, though, they needed to require that to happen with the guidance. They should have let that.
Do we know it's strictly a presentation and not a Q&A at all?
It could be a Q&A. It could be a Q&A. The night when I was at the hearing, after the school board president, who I thought, his name is Scott Hoff, I met him for the first time, I'll say on the record, I thought he did an unbelievable job under a very stressful situation presenting. I mean, that has to be very difficult to be talking about a dissolution. And when you've gone to school there, your kids go there, you've lived your life there, that has to be very difficult. I thought he did an excellent job presenting why they're at where they're at and what they've been trying to do up to this point in time. That's opinion, I admit it, but I wanted to share it because I think he deserves that recognition. With that being said, Tony, going off what you just asked, the board, there was one individual, no one else did, but they could have. There was a time to ask him questions after his presentation. I don't know if there will be time here. I think there will be maybe a little bit. I think they want to keep it to 30 minutes by all means. But there was one question by one individual. It was actually by the DPI rep sitting on the committee. He asked a question, Mr. Hoff, he asked a question about state report card and Palmyra-Eagle state report card. And he wanted to know what was being done on certain things about the report card. So we will definitely be putting all of our achievement stuff together and needing to talk that narrative through on different questions.
You only got 30 minutes, you know.
I know. I know.
Good luck.
Who's talking? Is it-
That's why I'm talking. I'm just there. Hi, Chris over here. The individuals who were there, to give you an idea, so the individuals, there was David Carlson from DPI, he's the DPI rep, and then every other individual, the other 6 individuals are all CISA representatives from different CISAs. So you had Tom Weber, I didn't write down where they're all from, but like Tom Weber's from Sun Prairie area. So you had Cliff Gerbers, Amy Riddle Swanson, David Carlson was the DPI rep, Joanne Wiedenholt, Stephen Pate, he's actually from Portage, I grew up in Portage, so that's why I knew that, and Katie Maloney. So they will be there for each public hearing. And their primary 2 things, like I said, are they made it very clear: educational welfare of Palmyra-Eagle students and impact on all surrounding districts. Again, that impact, very broad. How will that be recognized? We're working with Jeff Lacey from String Patterson and Lacey. That's Shane Lewis's partner. And so he's been through, there's never been a dissolution, right? But he actually was through some of the districts who had were thinking about dissolutions. So no one's ever gotten even this far to the public hearing, unfortunately, for Palmyra-Eagle that they're at that stage. But so he has some pretty good background knowledge, and he has already been working with us, and he's going to, in the next week and a half, be working with us on the topics and how we should do the presentation and those type of things. I believe he also will even be at the 30-minute presentation. He came to the hearing last Thursday. I asked him to come with me, so he sat and
Is he
listened.
attorney, are they attorneys for any other districts?
Is he?
Yeah, or is that?
Is Train Lewis? I don't know, to be honest. I got the impression no on that. There were a lot of other people around, so I got the impression they all had their individual attorneys too.
Are these meetings at Palmyra-Eagle?
I would have to look. I have the list here. I think I shared that off. The next one, this one was at the high school, middle school, high school. The 21st one right now, it states, is at the community center in the high school, 3:30 to 5:30, and then 6:30 to 9:30. And again, what time our 30-minute presentation is not yet been told of us. The public hearing this week on Thursday is at Eagle Elementary School gym. Now, this one is not for the public to speak at this week's Thursday. This public hearing this week will be for staff to speak. So they're going through that process. A couple things I just wanted to, if I could go through. This is from the board president's presentation, so I wrote down a couple things that he had stated, and I'll just kind of go through. So he opened up the night with a presentation. Probably was about 30 to 45 minutes in length, roughly. I didn't keep track of time. But he specifically talked about kind of why they're at where they're at where they're at, and what they've done. So he stated that, you know, they believe they've made reasonable and effective cuts, and that they've been made over the years while keeping high quality education has been their goal. They've been working diligently to try to attempt reducing an open enrollment. That they obviously have had a great increase in the amount budgeted on open enrollment, especially from 2010-11 now up until 18-19 school year. He feels that obviously through the years, and especially now, that the community itself has unfortunately become divided, a divided community, he said, because of the range of emotions behind the topic, which I think we all can understand. As we know, the election results were, and I'm not talking the advisory, I'm talking the true election in regards to their first referendum, was at 39% yes and 61% no. The advisory to dissolve then, which was just an advisory question, was 53% yes and 47% no. They determined then that the Palmyra-Eagle Area School District in its current form is not financially viable any longer. Options for the board to consider as they were going through this process, they considered three different things he talked about. He talked about they considered consolidation, and he talked about that he felt that consolidation did not represent necessarily the best footprint of the district. And this is not just him. This was he was overlapping what their discussions as a board. Not allowing not all may want to go to one place if things were to be consolidated, that they talked about. The long-term debt was an issue, and they were concerned, and don't quote me on this, but I wrote it down, so I think he was referencing it. On consolidation, he was talking about like that they did not want people to viewing that there were backdoor deals going on in the consolidation process. And so they wanted it to be an open process, which they felt dissolution was an open process that maybe leads to something different, but let's let the open process take care of that. They talked about a territory transfer as being another option. They said, he phrased it as they were concerned about a let them go strategy, meaning that it would create a lot of winners and losers in the transfer of territory. They said he talked primarily about that being the major problem was the asset debt calculation, and that 49% of the taxable lands are in Jefferson, and 85% of assets are in Jefferson County. And he said that was an issue about winners and losers, and he said that's why they didn't think they could go through the territory transfer. So he said it led them to dissolution. He said that was the third option, and they talked about dissolution. They thought that would be the best opportunity for a successful transition for all parties. Not one they want, not one they want to even discuss, wish they wouldn't have gotten there, but he said they felt from those three, consolidation, territory transfer, dissolution, that this was the best opportunity for a transition for all parties to be successful. A couple things that he provided as examples. He said at the end of the 2020-2021, the ending fund balance would be projected at a negative $326,260. The reason is, in 1920, the ending fund balance is 2.2 million, and by the end of the 2021 budget deficit, it was going to be 2.5 million. So he said that that's right there, our point of feasibility in continuing the district. I thought this was interesting. Kind of goes to what Kathy was talking about, Baird model and numbers and projections and everything else. I really thought this was very insightful by him. He said, you know, Baird model projects numbers, as you know, right? But he goes, here's the deal, folks. He didn't say that, but I'm saying that. But he did say it like that. It doesn't project behaviors. It doesn't project behaviors. And he goes, and what he was saying is, he goes, and it goes to what Kathy was saying, and we say this all the time when we're talking about budgets and what we're going to cut, right, or reduce. He said the numbers change based on behaviors. So he goes, you can project all the numbers you want to the best of your ability, but based upon what your input is on your decisions and your outputs, he goes, your whole behaviors are going to change. And he goes, and what I mean by that is, he goes, look, we had, by our outputs changing, we had major staff turnover, right? He goes, and then based on that, we had students leaving. He goes, and based on that, we had open enrollment issues even more than our projections. All those things kept doing it because we had to keep making cuts and reductions. So he goes, every time we would try to make a cut and a reduction, it had a behavioral effect, which then affected our budget even worse, right? And so a couple of stats that he gave, they replaced 23 of 67 staff members this past year. So, as he said, he goes, I own my own business. He goes, everybody always says, run education like a business. He goes, well, I think there's things that you can think about on that, but he goes, I will tell you, I think it would be hard to run any of your own business if you were looking at 30%, 34% turnover every year. He goes, it would be really hard to run your own business. He said with that, he stated that they had 8 positions this past year that they did not replace by reassigning duties to other people to try and control their budget. But again, does that lead to behaviors? Because now we have more people leaving, and do we have more people leaving because they're saying that the positions that were no longer provided? Their bond ratings dropped from AA to BBB. Became much more difficult to borrow, he talked about. And he said something else. He goes, it became much more difficult to deal with vendors. So he stated that, and then he brought up Kettle Moraine. And he said, you know, all of you are probably well aware that Kettle Moraine didn't pass their last referendum question either, and they're struggling to determine where to go next, right? He goes, but Kettle Moraine spent a lot of time talking about sustainable long term. What does it mean to have to be sustainable for a long term? Like how? How do you do that? And he goes, here's the deal. He goes, they came up with 3 things. He goes, they said, increase your open enrollment. That's what they said, it's sustainable long term. Or ask the legislation for changes in state funding. And he said the third one was seek an operational referendum.
That's all there is.
He goes, now, he goes on, and he just talked about it. He said, he goes, that's it. And he goes, and that's what we've been talking about, right? He goes, we've been trying to do those things. And he spoke very elegantly about, he didn't speak against the law or for the law of open enrollment. He didn't go there. He just said, he goes, look, it's the law to have open enrollment. And he goes, I don't blame other districts for operating within that law. He goes, we were trying to. He goes, but the realities is, and I've heard you say this, he said, was this. We're supporting every other district's resources. He goes, that's what we're doing. He goes, we're supporting other districts because so many kids are going to other districts for the open enrollment. He goes, so what we're doing when we're losing that money, we're supporting all their additional programming and resources. So as we're competing against these other districts, we're providing some of the new programming in the other districts. And he goes, that's a little bit of a conundrum and a problem in the methodology. The other thing which we all know, and then he said, right, and I think he was reiterating it because he's probably spoken on it so many times, he goes, we've made our cuts. He went through all the different cuts they've done for 5, 6, 10 years. And he goes, but you know, you only get to do those cuts one time. It was not like we get to go back, we cut the position. We don't get that position back again. He goes, so we're running out of things to even cut, right? It's finite. So he talked about that. And just that he feels really bad that there's winners and losers happening in education. He did talk about, and I did not know this, he said Palmyra-Eagle area school district has had 14 failed referendums since 1991.
Wow.
So I did not know that. It kind of goes to our discussion earlier about the importance of, you know, when people talk about like if one doesn't go, we'll come back with another, or East Troy has this history. I think we're slowly changing that component, and I think we're changing it to understanding like it's not about setting it up for a second one. It's about doing it now and doing it right now and talking about it now and making people understand the need now. So we don't have that, right? Because I do believe those things build momentum too, and they just scorch the earth every time.
That's one every 2 years. Do the math on that, that's every 2 years they were asking for money and never got it.
Yeah.
Right, well, they,
Well, 91.
28 years, you said they had 14 referendums.
Yeah, 14, right?
I
Yeah.
had my math.
You're right. Yeah, it's pretty good, Steve. It's pretty good. I had to think about where 91 was. And then he concluded by a few things, but he just said, he goes, I'm not blaming any other district. He did a really nice job. This is about Palmyra. But he did say, he goes, it really comes down to two. He goes, then compare us to the districts that are getting referendums passed. We've had these discussions, some of the similar ones, right? And there's a lot of other districts of the 424 in the state of Wisconsin that are having these type of similar discussions. They might not be dissolving, I'm not saying that, but they're having similar discussions about challenges, right? And he just talked about that. He said, he goes, look at the potential of referendums that have passed in certain districts and the amounts. And he goes, and when, right? And if they're passing them a decade ago, and they're on their second or third operational, and there's districts that aren't passing any, he goes, how much farther behind do you think, right? And then again, behaviors. And he just said that, he goes, so what occurs when one passes and one does not? He goes, well, no, that's why we're here. So I thought he did a really nice job. So anyway, so that was kind of the presentation. A lot of individuals got up and spoke that night, very emotional. And like I said, not a lot of questions by the school district boundary board, appeals board, but I think the next phase, like I said, next phase, they're gonna listen to staff, and then it'll be the surrounding. It's an unknown charter territory, so I wish I could provide tons of more information. I think, you know, the key will be, how do we feel coming in on the 21st on the presentation? But I think we'll feel comfortable presenting, but like I said, we're not going in there, that's not a night to be like speaking to the public going, this is why you come here to East Troy. I think we're focusing on, unfortunately, we're here. We wish we weren't, due to the fact of Palmyra dissolving, Eagle dissolving, right? But with that being said, we recognize that with the school district boundary appeals board, we're trying to help you understand what does it mean for Palmyra. And I think it gets stressed, because I think that's what you guys have stayed very strong too. That our board too is most concerned about the Palmyra-Eagle students. And so we'll talk to you about what East Troy is. We'll talk to you about our current transportation. We'll talk to you about what it means if we're right up to your border right now, how long it takes for a route to go from point A to point B, and what it would mean if we went 5 miles in on transportation and those type of things. And I think they just want to know space and all that, right? They obviously want to try and do their best. I would like to believe that they don't cause a bigger issue for another district either in whatever they decide on the dissolution, if they elect to do that. One other thing that I just wanted to state was this, and that is, and I'll give this to all of you, I'll pass this along to all of you, but we received this from DPI, and I just want to state it for the record. So they do have a webpage that if you want to go to, it's called the Palmyra-Eagle Dissolution webpage on DPI. And that talks about, again, the process a little bit, talks about what the advisory referendum was even about. It talks about, it gives the outline of the hearings and everything, and it talks a little bit about what is the role of the school district boundary appeals board. And I will say, I think some people don't understand their role. And I mean that role of the boundary appeals board. People, I got the impression that night when I was at the hearing, and I understand why, but people were asking them to do things that is outside their role. That unfortunately, right, they have to decide dissolve or not dissolve. That's it, that's their role. So all these other possible solutions, that's not what they're there for. That's not what they're there for. That's past. I hate to say that's passed. Anyway, so if you want to learn more, a little bit more about it, and I talk to the community when I say this, go to DPI and go to the Palmyra-Eagle dissolution webpage, and you'll be able to learn more about it. The other thing is, if you want to email, because you have, after you read stuff, or you have a comment, a testimony, they said that you can also email Palmyra-Eagle, or Palmyra-Eagle .comments@dpi.wi.gov. I'll repeat it one more time, and I'll get this published, but Palmyra-Eagle .comments@dpi.wi.gov. And that is, they do not say questions, I just want to let you know that. They say, if you have any written testimony or comments, that you can put them to that. They didn't put questions in there. I think they're pretty careful with their verbiage. They're saying testimony or comments, so that's different than questions. Anyway, so I just wanted to bring that up because I don't know if the public has any any testimony or comments, or just questions. Questions, visit the webpage. Comments, feel free to email.
Thank you.
Yep.
Future items from the board, anybody have any?
I just have a question for Cap. Maybe we need to put it in the future, but I know that Burns property was listed. Have you gotten any phone calls or anything, questions?
All right, and I'll make a motion to adjourn the executive session for discussion of leaves of absence required under request as provided under 19.851B and 19.851C.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote, Steve?
Yes.
Bob? Yes. Tony?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
And I vote yes. Closed session.
You know, you get Damon to write that down. Make it up.